Welcome back to the Keys to Success podcast. You have your host, Talisa Stubbs. And of course, I have my wonderful co host, Deba Douglas. How are we today, girl?
I am good. How are you doing? How's the weather? How's the weather for you?
The weather is good. There's ups and downs, but at least the weather has been pretty consistent for the most part. So that I can always bank on, even if my real estate stuff is like, blah.
Yes,
The
yes.
weather
And
is
it's
good.
literally by the minute, right? It's like by the minute. Like I felt like I knew what I was doing at one moment. And then I'm like, I know nothing. I really know nothing in this real estate game. That's how I feel most times out of the day.
Well, I mean, that's why we have Joseph here, because like Joseph is like the expert. So let me go ahead and introduce our guest. I have my good friend here, Joseph Lopez. Joseph actually used to live in Bakersfield, California, which like nobody ever even knows where Bakersfield, California is when I mention it. So when I found out that Joseph was there, he was doing real estate investing for a time. I was like, oh my God, we're like, in sync in some ways. But Joseph has like a plethora of experience with different real estate strategies. And so I wanted to bring him on just so he can share with our audience those newer investors who are just getting started, and even those investors who have been in the game for a little bit and may even be needing to like pivot and learn some different strategies. I have Joseph here to just kind of shed some light on that. So Joseph, thank you so much for being here. This is live, so the people are seeing you in like real time. If you don't mind just giving us a brief introduction, who you are, your background, and then we'll just kind of get into all your business. How about that?
Absolutely. Sounds great. I'm really excited to be here. It's been a while since we've connected, and every time we talk, it's like a 2-hour conversation. We have so much information, and there's a lot of networking that goes on, and we take all these ideas in and we collaborate and we start growing, and it's kind of nice. So to be on a platform, and I think that in preparation for the event, I started listening to some of the past podcasts that you had, and I was like, wow, this is a well-rounded individuals that are putting together some great info for everyone else to connect and to resonate with a lot of different members of the audience. So it's really pretty neat to be a part of it. Thank you guys for asking me, and also I appreciate any knowledge that I can share and soak in as well. So, but a little bit about me. I mean, I started in 1995 as a real estate salesperson, and I was just an agent. I represented buyers and sellers. That's all I did. And it was pretty fun. I really enjoyed it. I knew that it was my niche when I started to develop these relationships with buyers and sellers. And then eventually I would get one more lead and another referral. And I was like, wow, these people are referring business to me. They must like me. And I think what it was is that I was really passionate about home ownership, because as in our family, we grew up from apartment to apartment. We never owned any real estate. And during my mom's lifetime, she never acquired anything. At one point in time, she would eventually have a home, but that was only because of the efforts that I did once I got into sales. So to be able to put a lot of people into homes and see the reaction, see the family, and then come back and visit or be welcomed back, it was really nice to be a part of it. So I thought that was my lifelong career. And I thought I would just be representing. But eventually what would happen is I would represent a couple of real estate investors. And it was absolutely nothing like what I had prototypically thought a real estate investor was. The Mercedes driving, Gucci wearing, living in the hills. And there's probably a lot of people like that. But that's probably 2, 3, 4, 5%. Most of the other 95% have mismatched socks or wearing shorts or 20-year-old pickup truck. And they look like they're going to ask you for money, as opposed to having you put in cash offers. So that was a twist, because I had to identify that there was this whole new market that I could assist. And it was kind of fun. Representing investors is interesting because they're like, well, I want you to find me this dilapidated home. And at that time, we were doing a lot of real estate deals in Los Angeles, California. So there were houses like back in the mid 90s for like 120, 130,000, which are like 2-3 million now. It's just incredible how things have gone. But I started representing investors, and I quickly found out that my homeowner that I represented, I probably touch bases with them and do one more deal every 7 years, statistically. But an investor could do 7 deals in a year. And if you had 5 to 10 investors, you were busy, and you could double end deals, and you could also put families into those properties. And if they needed closing costs, you can get your seller to pay. So I found that niche was pretty interesting. And after a while, I got asked by one of the presidents of a hard money loan, when are you going to start doing your own deals? And I thought, like, wow, he's right. I felt like a bank teller. No disrespect to bank teller, but after a while you get desensitized to money that's passing by your hands all day long, and you go home with your 13, 14, $15 an hour. And that was me. I was making commissions, but what about creating wealth? Or what about buying a property every now and then? Or flipping a house, or like so many different things that you can do now, and short sales and wholesaling. And we'll talk about some of that. But back then it was cut and dry. You're either going to flip a house or buy a rental, or you're going to represent someone for a commission. And that was my entry into real estate investing. And soon after that, I just ended up representing a lot of real estate investors and subsequently being an investor. And then probably after a good 10 years, I kind of realized, okay, where do I want to be 10 years from now? And what do I have to do to get there? And being in sales was not necessarily the component that was going to get there. So a lot of people that know me, some people say, oh, you're a flipper, you flip homes. I do, but that's not the makeup what we do. We would probably, out of 10 houses, we would flip 2 and we would hold 8. And so we started doing the BRRRR strategy before I found out it was a term, so we were picking up houses that were dilapidated at auction or through wholesalers. Of course, it wasn't a wholesaler, wasn't a term like back in the late 90s. That was just some guy that got some deal and wanted to cut in between for a finder's fee. But we were developing these relationships, and that's one of the most integral steps about investing in real estate. It's the relationships that you're building along the way. Some of the realtors, the property managers, the wholesalers, other investors, these are all your collaborators. And you'll find that even your own sphere of influence, there's people in there that will help you and want to help you. And sometimes you just got to let them know what you're doing and ask for the help. So I've been fortunate that I probably, since 95, I was doing sales. Right around 2002, for a good run, 2002 to 2005, we started investing in real estate. And it's funny because, the subprime meltdown began in 2006. It was evident by 2007 when everything ran away. But in 2005, we actually elected to sell our entire real estate portfolio, not so much because we anticipated the downfall. If I was really good at predicting, I'd pick the lotto numbers. But what ended up happening is we started to see the signs. At that time, I was also a mortgage broker. So we had a lot of fraudulent activity that was occurring in our industry, and it was evident that this was not going to last. So we personally had a partner. We unloaded our entire portfolio, and we were just ready and cash ready for other opportunities that came. We didn't know at that time that it was going to be a while, about 2-3 years before it would start shifting in a more positive direction. And that was right around 2009. And right around 2009 is when I started studying other markets. And at that time, it was only Los Angeles and Riverside, San Bernardino County, these large core counties of Central California, very metropolitan counties, a lot of high density and an enormous population. And it had a lot of great opportunity. The only bad thing was that you would only be able to pick up as much based on how much money you had. And so, now we talk about raising capital and partnering and equity, joint, ownership in different projects. And those are all great terms. But when you're starting off and you don't have a platform to understand how to do that, it's almost like you're just borrowing money from friends. You're not saying, hey, would you like to partner with me in an investment opportunity? You're like, hey, do you have 15,000 I could borrow? And so that has shifted now to a more operational opportunity for everyone to get involved and scale, because I've actually made more money with partnerships than I've ever made or probably will ever make by myself. It's just the sheer volume that momentum comes in, more opportunities are created, and then you're pitched more opportunities. So I kind of evolved to real estate agent, real estate broker, to mortgage broker, to eventually the investor platform. And then once I got into investing, it just opened up an entire umbrella of opportunity. So, but I'll be more than glad to talk about any of those aspects. I'm not sure which questions you might have for me or the audience.
Well, Deb, I know you got questions. I've got questions too. Joseph, what were some of the signs? You could say that, before the huge market crash in 2008, that you guys had sold your portfolio. I know that you saw that there was a lot of fraudulent activity going on, but are you seeing any of those signs now? Are they what are some of the signs that people should start to look out for prior to a crash?
Well, that's a good question. And I think because my real estate career started in 1995. So I was privileged to everything that occurred after that. But prior to 1995, I actually was working for Bank of America Real Estate Loan Servicing. So I got to learn everything that happened after a real estate agent would hand over the keys to a homeowner. And so when you're calling that 800 number, customer service kicks in. And I was one of 129 people in customer service, and we would handle everything from the ARM unit, which was the adjustable rate mortgage, because that was very popular.
Yeah.
Interest rates were 9.5 fixed back then. You know, we talk about 7.5, like bad words, and 9.5, and people were buying. So a lot of people were getting the FHA 5.5, and it was a adjustable, and it was locked in for 5 years, which was great. And then it would adjust. And it was a very good program. A lot of people understood it, but when we talk about fraud, I learned about fraud working at Bank of America Real Estate Loan Servicing Center. There is one thing about fraudulent activity, but there's also misrepresentation, like real estate agents telling the customers that this is a fixed rate for 30 years at 5.5, when indeed it was not. 5 years later, that realtor forgot about them, didn't care about them, was on to something else. And we got the phone call saying, hey, how come my payment went up $400? Like, well, you have an adjustable rate mortgage. What are you talking about? My realtor said it was fixed. So not being a realtor, I couldn't understand that. I was like, wait a minute, how could they have not read the documentation? Only to find out as I became a real estate agent and a real estate broker, I want to say about 80% of the real estate agents don't understand the contracts that they are using and representing. That's sad, which means that you should ask questions. Don't assume anything. There's enough videos out there on YouTube for you to learn a lot about different things and different things that are going to affect you in the homeowner process. I think it's very important that the consumers get educated and they have proper representation. To be able to select the representation may be interviewing more than one person. And so it's not necessarily the guy that's doing the most sales or the girl that has great marketing. It's like, what are you going to be able to do for me, and how can I cultivate a relationship with you? Because it's going to be more than one transaction. If you think about it, I may buy a house, my daughter might buy a house, my friend, my neighbor. I'm going to refer all these people, and I want to make sure that everybody's taken care of. But unfortunately, there are some aspects, and then that's not just real estate. You know, it's not just mortgage. I mean, there's doctors, there's lawyers, there's a variety of different careers where you have a bad apple makeup. But to answer your question about some of the signs, so as a mortgage broker, I was privileged to some of the account executives that would come into our office so they can pitch their products. We had so many different banks wanting to vie for our loan officer's business that I always made it a point to say, well, what is different from you than everybody else? What's your niche? And they would say, well, we've got this product. And they would talk about it. I was like, okay, that's an interesting product. Let's go ahead and address it to everyone in a sales meeting. And they were introducing documents. They were introducing loans where it was like 1099, same as W-2 program. So if you had a truck driver who made $150,000 legitimately, but legitimately also had probably about $100,000 worth of write-offs, their adjusted gross was $50,000. And that would be normal. Real estate agents make $200,000-300,000, have $200,000 to $300,000 in write-offs. So their adjusted gross is sometimes zero. Investors have a negative adjusted gross. So does that mean that they don't make any money? No, it means that they have a lot of deductions and they have a lot of different things that they can invest in to put themselves, to get that adjusted gross down to zero and remove a lot of the liabilities. Well, what if you had a product that you could just show a 1099 that, hey, I made $199,000 last year, and they would take that as a W-2.
Wow.
And I remember raising my hand and saying, hey, but you can't verify a 1099 the way that you can with the form 4506 that lenders use and get the accurate information like a W-2 employee. And I remember, instead of combating that question, he said, exactly, implying, just send it to me. We're not going to verify it. So that was one of the first signs that I saw. The other signs that I saw were that there was a lot of, and some members of the audience may not know, but like back in like 2000, 2001, 2003, there was a lot of changes. So mortgages were starting to mimic FHA. So you'd have a conventional look-alike product. So it was a 3% conventional. Eventually, there would be zero down conventionals and legitimate conventional programs. And those are really good to get somebody in the house that may not, that the money is what's keeping them from getting the house. They have the FICO, they have the job, they have the income. They just might not have the full down payment and closing costs. And then you've got this program that could bridge the gap. That would be a good program. But there was a lot of also being introduced a lot of products like the 80-20. So you get an 80 first, 80% of your purchase price is one loan, and 20% of your purchase price is another loan. So the first would be a typical 6% interest rate. Your second would be about 9% interest rate. And then they would blend those two interest rates together and they would say, oh, you have a blended 8.5, 8.25. And so people were getting in the door with no money down, which is fine in theory, but it was a 228. It was fixed for 2 years and then it would adjust. And if you start reading the paperwork, it could adjust 2 points in 1 year with a cap of 5. So if you started off at like a 7%, let's say on your first, it could go up to 9% the next year or 2 years later. And then it could go up another 2 points to 11%. And if you borrowed 400,000, you can imagine that that jump is a lot. So what people were doing is they were just selling their property and they would get in the same program all over again. And there was this conundrum where you're kind of you're kicking the can down the road, because the reality is you're always going to have an adjustable rate mortgage unless you go to a fixed rate product. And if you go to a fixed rate product that now required W-2s, paycheck stubs, and tax returns, you probably wouldn't qualify. So a lot of people were just kind of writing this out. Of course, it all came to a halt. But what was happening behind the scenes is that many of the mortgage brokers were not sending in the 4506 form to verify any of the documentation. So there was a lot of fraudulent behavior occurring in that aspect, in that arena. In addition to that, there was other aspects where you would have products that weren't necessarily fraudulent, but questionable, like a NINA loan, a no income, no asset loan. So can you imagine the 1003 application that is a uniform application across all federal states? And you see that there's your name, your address, your social, but no income information. And under banking, there's no asset information. Your credit report pulls and it auto-populates your car payment, your credit card payments and all that. There's no income to support it. As long as you had a certain FICO. When things were really good, you could have a FICO as low as 620. When things started tightening up, they'd make sure that you had like a 680, then a 720. The program is a good product and is a good program. Unfortunately, there was a lot of abuse. So when you have misrepresentation, fraudulent activity, and abuse in the system, it's just a matter of time before it blows up. So are you going to start to curb your activities so that you can shift and pivot into a more conservative environment to be able to capitalize on that? Or are you just going to wait and see what happens? And a lot of people waited to see what happens. And, we did exhibit a couple of behaviors that kind of shared with us that, like, in retrospect, you look back and you're like, well, what did I do different? And why did I scathe out of that? And I hear a lot of horror stories like, I didn't lose a property in foreclosure, or I didn't lose anything. We had other issues though. Like, let's say you were a successful real estate agent, you had a lot of transactions on your belt, and you had buyers galore, but now the banks were failing. So now you couldn't get financing.
Yeah.
So that was an issue. So if you didn't have anything else to support yourself, it was like, what are you going to do to be able to keep that momentum alive? And then you'd see people start doing short sales. And so you'd have this professional real estate agent doing something that is not necessarily, like, I'm going to charge you to help you do loan modifications. And I'm going to help you short sell your house. Hey, wait a minute. If I can do a loan modification and short sell the house to my buddy, then I can get this house for a cheaper price. Well, what happened to the owner of the property?
Right.
Did you just egg them out of the potential profit? So that kind of manipulation and misrepresentation has always been a very great concern. I will share with you that because I've been in large markets like Los Angeles and small markets like a 1,200 square foot city, I mean, 1,200 demographic city in East Texas, regional activity differs.
Yeah.
So I don't want to paint this blanket picture that all fraud happens everywhere, right? But there is certain areas I think that are more prone to it. And so being in the industry, you kind of catch on that, and it also affects your decisions when you're investing in real estate. For example, if I'm going to buy a property right now and I'm going to go ahead and maybe want to flip it, or maybe I want to keep it as a rental, I have certain tests that I want to make sure that it qualifies by. Am I going to be able to flip this property and make a profit? If the answer is yes, whatever my desired profit is, then it's a checkbox. What if I'm not able to flip it? Maybe the market turns, there's a shift in the interest rates, as we saw what happened in February, in April of 2022. So could I rent it out? Can I just hold on to it, do a cash out refinance, rent it out, get some positive cash flow, and just hold on to it for a little different time period? Maybe 3 or 4 years later, I could sell it, and the market would have been in a better position, or interest rates are going to be different, or we're going to have a whole different, like cost segregation advantages, or there's all these other factors that go on to your decision making. The other one is where somebody can introduce a different arena of investing, like a short-term rental or a mid-term rental, or repurpose the property. And I have some of my colleagues have rented it out to like rehab centers, or they rent it out by the room with this new term called pad split. So this is another opportunity. And so, if you see that those are, hey, I can flip it, I can rent it, I can pad split it. So far, so good. But what if the end of the world is near and I really got to dump this property? Will I be able to get rid of this property and unload it for all of my all-in money? So if I've got, $180,000 into a property, I'm halfway into rehabbing it, so I have another $30,000 into it. Could I get all that money and $5,000 more and just unload it to maybe another investor who wants to keep it in his portfolio for whatever reason? And I found that if I was conservative in my approach to make sure that all of these all these boxes were checked, that I'd have a better ability to withstand the storm and also weather any problems in the industry. Kind of like what's been happening in the last 2 years practically. It's an incredible roller coaster, and a lot of people that have been in the industry for decades, this is just another time for a great opportunity to pick up properties at a discount. But if somebody came into the industry 2-3 years ago, where interest rates were 3%, then maybe their market is, I don't even know how I'm going to do business because I can't make the numbers work. There are opportunities, but one needs to be able to be open-minded, shifting, engaging, and collaborating. And I mean that like not only with your own team, but other teams as well. So
I love this. This is so insightful because we are starting to see a turn in the market. Houses are sitting a lot longer. There's a lot more inventory.
yes.
One thing that you did mention, Joseph, was that you were a real estate agent. You went to become a broker, did mortgage. Talk to the agent that may be watching right now that is like kind of on the side of like, the market is really shifting. I wish I had some passive income. I wish I had something else, some type of stream of income, because it is slow. It's hard for them to convert buyers with higher interest rates. What can you share with them to give them that extra nudge of, you kind of know what you're doing as a real estate agent? How do you transition over and now become that investor?
Well, it's a good question. And as Talisa indicated at the beginning, I was investing in Bakersfield. And so we resonated with Bakersfield for a variety of reasons. And for many people that don't know, Bakersfield is is in Kern County, Central California. You have oil and gas, you have agriculture, you now have solar. And what was happening was that there was a shift in demographics and regional opportunities and businesses that were growing, and everybody missed it. Everybody missed it. I started buying in properties in Bakersfield when they were $60,000, And we'd go to the auction and we'd pick up properties for 27, 42, 55. I mean, I know people that have Audis that are $100,000, and I probably got the same amount of money. I bought two houses at the auction. And now if you look back, you see all these different hotel chains, expansion of hospitals, distribution centers galore. Frito-Lay was already there, but now you have Amazon. So Amazon's there, everybody else is coming. You have a huge, enormous shift. And so what was happening is that I kind of looked at where I was in Los Angeles, and I said, gosh, you know what? I think there might be some other opportunities elsewhere. So how do I start researching these other pockets of where I could invest and where I could invest personally? So not represent investments, but I could do that too, make commissions along the way, but where I can buy some property for my family. And so we could have some properties that we could keep for cash flow purposes to pay all the bills, and also for deductions and for a variety of different other factors and growth and wealth accumulation. And that's what started me to go to other areas like Riverside and San Bernardino County, but eventually I would land in Bakersfield. And at first I was driving 2 hours from Los Angeles just to invest there. I met some people, we created a company there, we did really well with each other, and it was a great experience. But then I moved, and I says, I'm tired of driving back and forth when opportunities all around me. And I think that was one of the first things that I would encourage everyone as a real estate agent and an entrepreneur, that you have that hat to get out of your comfort zone. They say, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Yeah. You can live wherever you want to live, but invest where it makes sense. It may not be where your city is. It might not be in your county. It might be 2 hours away, like in my case. Now, with that said, sometimes it's price points. I mean, I can imagine there's a real estate agent in San Francisco is having a hard time buying a $1.8 million property as a fixer. And then the holding costs for that and the rehab and the liability is just an enormous amount. They can still do great. They would just need a partner, and they might need a joint equity partner and some private money lending and the right lender to lend them a high leverage, and they have to have their numbers in order. It's still possible. But for $1.8 million, I'd rather buy 10 houses in East Tennessee or East Texas. So we started branching out from like Kern County, Central California, and we started to study business-friendly states and landlord-friendly environments.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I didn't know. And I didn't know that California was neither. It was always very challenging, very highly regulatory, very highly taxed.
Yeah.
But when that's the environment that you're in, you don't know what it's like to operate out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
So once I started to realize that there was other states that I should look into, I actually drove and stayed at those states for at least a minimum of 1 week. We first started with going to Arizona, and then we did Nevada. And then eventually we came over to Florida, Texas. We would come to Texas 3 times. So there's a reason why I'm in Texas. But it wasn't the first time that I came to Texas that I decided this is where I want to be, because I was researching. We researched Tennessee, we researched Georgia, and they were all great states. And any of them would have done really well. But I had more associations to Texas. So we took some staff from California, some contractors, project managers. One of my tenants was coincidentally relocating to Texas.
Wow.
Specifically East Texas.
What part of East Texas were you in?
So Tyler is the tertiary market that we're in. A lot of people recognize Tyler, and we're 2 hours east of Dallas. And
nice.
We see that like the major cities here are like Longview, and then you have your Tyler. Populations of over 100,000. And we've invested in small towns where populations are 1,200, 5,000, 10,000. And there are still great opportunities there. But I wouldn't recommend anyone invest in an area that has less than 100,000 people unless you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, or you're looking for rentals. If you're looking for rentals long-term, that's fine. Yeah. But if you're looking to flip properties, you want to be in a higher concentration of volume. Mm-hmm. You're going to have more accurate resources for materials, more labor, and you're going to be able to be more competitive. If you've got 3 handymen that are bidding and that's all your choices are versus 300, you're going to be able to dictate prices. You're telling them, this is what I'm paying. If you like the job, great. If not, I understand. And it's
Wow.
nothing disrespectful, it's just business. You're also going to develop great relationships because good people work with other good people.
Yeah.
So when you've got someone that is really, really good, you know, there's such a excellent plumber, ask that person for the HVAC guy. More
Yeah.
than likely, he's going to recommend you someone that is at his or her caliber because they know the kind of person you are. Now, if you're not a good person, they're probably going to recommend you somebody bad. So you got to take care of people. But again, it's about relationships. So,
Wow. I love
but yeah.
that.
So
So,
that's one of the first things that I would share. Like, get out of your comfort zone, start investing in other areas, and you may not know an area. Like somebody says, "Well, you should invest in Ohio." Okay, well, is it a business friendly state? Is it a landlord friendly state? And for me, if it's not, I stop. Doesn't mean I'll never invest there, but I may not invest in residential. I may invest in a boutique hotel, or maybe be a limited partner in a storage facility down the road. That would be something different because residential real estate falls under RESPA, the Real Estate Standards and Procedures Act. That's where you have a lot of regulation. And so, like evicting people, I'm sure we've all heard horror stories. You know, I have my own horror story. Um, at one point, we had 52 rentals in California, and we started unloading them year by year by year. Because if you unload them all at once, you're gonna have a tax problem. So, our last property, which was actually in Chowchilla, California, that tenant took us a year and a half to evict.
wow.
Everybody was fine. That last guy who wasn't paying the rent, we gave him a variety of different opportunities. Then when we had to go down the legal process because of California's non-business friendly, non-landlord rights, it took us a year and a half. Fortunately for us, the property was elevated in value, so it was appreciating during the 1.5 years. It could have been easily the other way around, though, so it was fortunate. Um, in Texas, we've been fortunate. We haven't had to evict anyone. I have my personal reasons for that. Um, in Texas, you know you're going to get kicked out if you don't pay your rent. It's a known fact.
Yeah.
And so you're less likely to pay other things than to pay your rent first. Now, if you have a problem, there's a death in the family, lost a job, talk to the property manager, the landlord, and you're going to be able to get by with some assistance. And it might be just, hey, I'm going to give you some extra time. I'm going to break it down. But I'm not referring to that scenario. I'm referring to the people that are purposely and maliciously not paying and
Mhm.
giving you the "what are you going to do" attitude.
Oh
Right.
And
God.
that's unfortunate because there's
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And that's you know what? It's so funny because I share the same sentiment. I'm in Texas. I have a lot of
Okay.
rentals, and it is a lot more of like, hey, I'll work with you, but if you are just non-responsive, you do have to get out. And it's very
Yes.
easy. I wouldn't say easy because I have gone through some hiccups, but if you just really talk to them and tell them like, hey, you really do not have any right to be here. And if we go to court, most likely, depending on what county you're in, the judges will fall in my favor as a landlord. So,
Mhm.
I mean, that is something. So,
Right.
we have a lot of people that are listening. How can they get connected with you? Like, you've done a lot, there's a lot of knowledge that you can share. How does someone get connected with you?
Well, I think one quick way is to go to my website. It's my name, josephlopez.com. And on my social media, my phone numbers and information is there. I'm a little bit more active on Instagram lately.
Mhm.
It's one of those things where it's kind of like I have a lot of information to share, and sometimes I'm just so busy and I don't post. And then when I do post, I get a lot of feedback and it's positive. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to showcase a little bit more. But my underneath my name is joseph.lopez.investor. And that's a great way of following me. You could DM me and I could send you my contact information as well. And but I'm all for collaboration. And if somebody had a question, if they had some the advice, I'd be more than glad to share, my experience and give them some tips and see how they can be a better investor.
Good. And we'll provide that contact information in the show notes for those of you who are watching. So Joseph, you are just like a wealth of information. Oh my goodness. I feel like we need to like do like a whole nother series and have you come back on just to share like the other half. But you said a lot of things. One thing that I just kind of want to before we exit here is have options.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't get so stuck on one thing or one exit strategy
Yeah.
that you are driving yourself crazy, because if it's not working, if the numbers are not working, it's not nothing's going to fall out the sky
No.
and it
Mhm.
just automatically start working. And Deb and I were going to talk about this last week, but we had some hiccups just about pivoting. It is
Right.
okay to pivot. I've had to pivot. I was renting out rooms to, a certain population. And there was a lot of riffraff in the house. And so we were like, you know what? We're going to pivot. And then we just ended up putting those same rooms on Airbnb. And then now, like, the money's coming in again. Like, we've got
Good.
professionals, and similar to what you said, Joseph, sometimes you have to get out of your comfort zone. Sometimes you have to get out of your city in order
Hmm.
to explore a different market. And there's nothing wrong with that. I feel like I'm living in a different city every other week, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So, anyways, Deb, what last words do you have before we end? But I just think that this was super informational, and a lot of gems were dropped on here today.
Yeah, I think one thing was it's okay to continue to want to yearn different knowledge and to grow. And it's okay to get to a point where you're like, okay, I like where I'm at, but I still want more. I mean, Joseph, you talked about
Mhm.
moving from being a real estate being just a real estate agent, and then moving on to become a broker, then getting into mortgage. But all of that now has really helped you really understand contracts, understand working with private investors and being a private investor, which it continues to grow and you just build upon your skill level. So that was just great having you just kind of
Mhm.
share it's okay to outgrow your current situation and keep growing.
Absolutely. I do think that we will evolve and in our industry, and there might be things that are exciting in one decade that are going to be different for you the following decade. We've been transitioning out of residential, for example. We own some commercial and we're invested in some multifamily assets. I know I have an interest in learning about triple net leases. And
Mm-hmm.
also, we have someone in our social circle that has invested in RV parks and also mobile home parks. And I find that fascinating. And at first, it's kind of like, wow, I don't even know. It's like millions of dollars. I don't understand. I'll never be able to do that. And then you realize the practicality of being able to be a partner with a group of
Wow.
investors investing in a model called a syndication, where
Yeah.
you're not even running the show, the general partner is, but you're part of that deal, which means not only are you invested and maybe receiving a certain rate of return or an equity or ownership percentage, but you're also able to ask that professional, it's like, hey, so why did you pick this area? And what do you think about this particular area? Or what about these value add improvements, and how did you discuss that, and and you're just picking their brains, and they're part of the program. They're going to share this information, kind of how we started to invest in multifamily. We just redeployed. Maybe we bought a house, fixed it up, did a cash out refi, got our money back, held it for 3 to 5 years, sold it, and instead of taking the money and buying more residential real estate, we took that and parked it in a multifamily asset. And now we learn so much more because we're invested and vested in the deal.
Yeah.
So that's another way of being able to kind of come outside of your comfort zone and start branching out. And you may not like it, but how are you going to know?
Until you
Like,
try it.
so I know that there are certain factors that I'm looking for when investing, certain areas, certain states, and also like who's the operator and what experience do they have, and how can I either be on the team, add value to the team, or am I just a limited partner? And maybe I'm too busy right now and I can't invest and be a partner. Maybe what I could do is bring in my net worth to be a key principal on a loan. I
Yeah.
have very little responsibility. I do have some liability, but now I get to benefit from that deal when it goes to fruition. Or
Right.
maybe I'm really like, there's a word between active and passive. So active is you're constantly involved, like a flipper would be
Yeah.
flipping this property, very, very active. But maybe you have a doctor who's an investor who has his own or her own career and is just parking $100,000 in your investment, and you're giving them a guaranteed rate of return. Well,
Yeah.
that's a passive investment, and you can be on both sides and you can shift. So
That's
it's
the
great.
beauty of it. I mean,
That
that's
is.
honestly, that's the beauty of real estate. You can be
Mhm.
active or you can be as passive as you want to be. I
Right.
love that. Okay, well, this has been amazing, Joseph. Like I said, you're a wealth of information. We'd love to have you back
Thank
on the
you.
show. You
Absolutely.
guys, if you guys have been watching, make sure that you go follow Joseph on Facebook, on Instagram, and visit his website. Like I said, we're going to have that in the show notes. You guys always, we want to hear what else you guys want to hear. What are some topics that you want us to discuss? Yeah, I think that's it. Deva, you
Awesome.
want
Thank you
to?
so much.
Thank
Thank
you. It was a pleasure.
We'd
you.
like to thank you for tuning in to the Keys to Success podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to listen to more, be sure to subscribe to Apple Podcast and YouTube for our latest episodes.
Check out our show notes for more information on mentorship, private money lending, or if you just want to be a guest on our podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.